Hello again, everyone. This is Kurt with the Monongahela Northern N-Scale Model Railroad. In my last video, I was showing you how I built out the framework for the scene behind me using styrofoam, screen material, and plaster cast material. I had a little bit more prep work to do after that before I started creating the actual scenery. So when thinking about what I wanted to do here, I realized that I hadn't done any scenery in nearly 20 years. And at that, it was only a river and some stuff around the river. Not all that complicated. What I also realized was that this scene behind me will probably be the epic scene in the entire layout, and I'm starting with it. Probably not a good idea, but I had to commit to it since I need this done in order to install the section that sits in front of it, and that connects the rest of the track on both sides of the layout. I'd done a little bit of research on the types of materials available, but certainly not enough to start detailing out this scene. I essentially didn't know what to use or even how to use it. Thank God for YouTube videos and all the videos you guys post. It's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I watched so many how-to videos and picked up ideas from all of them. Since it was my first scenery build, I decided not to video any of it and focus on trying different things and see what worked and what didn't work and what I liked best. I bought a whole bunch of things to try, including Woodland Scenic's rock molds, precast stones, talus, various coloring agents, lightweight hydrocal, sculptamold. I even had some hydrocal from 15, 20 years ago when I was working on the layout in the garage. I wanted to try them all out and see what I liked. The end result of my playing is behind me over here. I'll walk you through some of what I did to create this. So I put the bridges back in place in order to see what the scene looked like with the bridges in place and how everything fit together. I'm very happy with how it came out. For those of you who have seen my prior videos, this bridge here was the red bridge. I took it out, took the track off of it, spray painted it flat black, and it's all prepped and ready for me to start weathering it. This piece here was used with this rock mold. And then I used this bigger rock mold for this piece over here and some of the pieces up on top of the layout. Things that I did find out throughout this process was using lightweight hydrocal in this particular mold did not work for me. I don't know what I was doing wrong. Maybe I was doing something wrong, but every time I used lightweight hydrocal in this thinner mold, they shattered trying to take them out of the mold. For the deeper molds, I had no problem with using the lightweight hydrocal in that one or in this one. But it could have been something that I was doing wrong. I'm not really sure, but I decided to just use hydrocal and had no issues using regular hydrocal in that thinner mold. In the rest of the scene, I have a lot of different things. I have some talus in here, large and small. I have some precast rocks and rocks that I actually casted myself with another mold from Woodland Scenics. I have some precast rocks up here. This piece here is associated, it's the other part of this big piece that's down the bottom here. Some of this stuff I carved myself. I just put extra hydrocal or lightweight hydrocal in here and carved out some of this stuff myself. Same with back there. Some of it's precast rock, some of it's other stuff that I had made or pieces of molds that I stuck in there. And then once everything was in there and dried, and I started working on coloring it. For the coloring piece of this, I used a whole bunch of different colors. I have earth undercoat in there. I have burnt umber, raw umber, stone gray. All of them I used as washes so that they were watered down pretty good. Had some trouble figuring out how much water to use. I eventually figured out what worked and caused a good drip in some places. In other places, I didn't want the drip. I just wanted the color in there, so I didn't make it as watery. Then I came back and mixed some stone gray and some white together to get some lighter colors so I could highlight some areas throughout the layout to bring out some of those rocks and create a little bit more depth in the coloring. Not quite done with this. I'm pretty close. But I think I'm going to work on the other side of the river for now. I'll do some videos on how I'm putting that together and include it at the end of this one. One thing I forgot to mention is all of this space in here where I was just adding onto the existing undercoating or the existing framework, I did with lightweight hydrocal. A lot of the spaces I filled in between rocks and different things was done with lightweight hydrocal. Simply to keep the weight down on the entire layout, and it actually seemed to go on really nice and was easy to carve, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to use that. found that hydrocal is very difficult to carve. This big rock down here was one chunk of the mold, and this was another chunk of it. It literally took a lot of work to cut through that with a knife and get it to break apart because it was so hard. So if you're going to use hydrocal in those big thick molds, be prepared to have to do some work to cut them down. But the lightweight hydrocal works out really well in those larger molds where it didn't work out in the shallower molds. So as we move over to the left side of the river, I had to figure out how to handle the gap between the bridge abutment and this tunnel portal. I bought the Woodland Scenics cut stone retaining walls. They come like this. I had to cut it down in order to make it fit and painted it the same color as the tunnel portal. And I think I kind of like the look of that. I have to do some weathering on it yet. I'll weather it and see if I like it. If I don't like it, then I may come back and do a mold with this mold and put that rock wall in there and see how that looks. And then I'll figure out which one I like best. So I started also building out some of the rock formations on the left side of the waterfall here. I have the big mold that I made and I cut it into 3 pieces and I have them set up. I filled it in with hydrocal. Have a bunch of small pieces from another shattered mold because I used the lightweight hydrocal again and just had a whole bunch of little pieces. So I took those little pieces and used them throughout. I'm going to fill in some of these gaps and make this look a little cleaner. There's some work to be done here. I'm going to start videoing as I do some of this work while it's in progress so that you guys can see how I'm doing this. So I made a mold out of the thin mold for the rock wall and test fitting it in here. I think that looks pretty good for a fit there. The mold itself broke and I ended up cutting off an end piece to make it fit in there nice and clean. I'll backfill this with some hydrocal or some plaster of Paris or something and fit that in place. So I mounted the wall in here with some plaster of Paris behind it, and I'm coming back with some sculptamold to try and fill in some of the space. I haven't used the sculptamold, so this is a new thing for me, and I'm curious to how it works. And so you're watching my first usage of sculptamold. It looks easy enough to use, so hopefully this won't be too difficult. I'll be able to figure out how to use this stuff. It looks pretty easy, and I like kind of the way it goes on and the texture. That filled in really nice in there. This stuff's pretty lightweight. Now I'm gonna, oops. You're supposed to use wet fingers when you're working with this stuff, and that you can use your fingers just to put it on, and that seems to be pretty easy. So I kind of like that. I'll get this all filled in and smoothed out, and then I'm going to come back after it starts to harden and sculpt it out into rock formations. Get some nice edges on it. This may be my go-to stuff because I do like the way it works and how easy it is to put in. These rock formations that are up here, I'm going to put them in place with some glue or some hydrocal or something to glue them in place. And there, that looks like it went on pretty nicely. Just start filling in some space down there because I'm going to need that. I may use some more of the sculptamold down the bottom here, as opposed to trying to cast more rocks, and because it seems pretty easy to use. I kind of like it. So there you go. Okay, I'm all done playing around with that. So, got pretty much what I wanted out of that whole thing. So as you can see as I pan across, looks pretty good. I still got some work to do. I got to fill in the gaps over there next to the wall and the tunnel portal. But I think I'm in pretty good shape up here. And then I just got to work on the top side up by the track, and then on the back on the other side of the track, and then the top section will be ready for color. So I created a thin mixture of hydrocal to put these rocks in place up here. And I'm going to, actually I need to spray some water on here to help with this setting. And I'm going to just back butter the rocks and put a little bit down, set them in place, smooth out the edges. These are Woodland Scenics precast stones, precast boulders. I kind of like them. They're not too bad. They're easy enough to use. A little expensive, but I just wanted to try a bunch of different things here right now and see what I like, what I didn't like. And I kind of like these too, but can't afford to use too many of them. Move that down a little bit. Close up that gap. I didn't want that big of a gap in there, but that looks pretty good. So as this is drying, I'm coming back in and cleaning up some of the hydrocal that got around the outsides of this, because I don't want it to look like a big round bubble around the outside. So I'm just coming in and breaking down some of it to try and create the sharper edges that were on these boulders to begin with. And it's not that hard to do before the hydrocal really sets. You want to do this because once it sets, it's pretty hard. I think we're all good there. I'll come back with my little vacuum and vacuum up all the loose pieces, loose debris that's in there. Or maybe I'll leave it there and use some scenic glue and glue it down. So I'm pretty much done with this entire scene on the left side of the river. Very happy with how this came out. Got a whole bunch of different things in here. I have rock molds. I have rocks that I carved myself. I have some precast rocks that I bought from Woodland Scenics. Bunch of different things. There's rock molds in here and over here. I like the way it's looking. I started doing some coloring on it. There's a gray wash that I put together with the stone gray and white about 3 parts to 1 for the color, and then added water for the wash. And then the brown color in here is just the earth undercoat from Woodland Scenics as a straight wash. I tried to cover most of the area with the earth undercoat after I had put the gray down, and then I'm going to come back and do raw umber, burnt umber, some darker grays that I'll play around with in the colors to try and get closer to what I did on the right side of the river and match it up. One thing I found when I started doing all this coloring is that I have some places where I didn't finish carving rocks, like here and back there. A few things aren't finished on the back part of that scene, so I have to go resolve those, and then when I get back to coloring and doing all the washes on this, I'll actually record it and show you how I'm doing all the wash, and you can see how it progresses. For the first part of this, I'm going to work on this top and back section and just stay in this area with the coloring, and then I'll work on the face here, and then I'll get back over to this a little bit later on. So I'm using a stone gray and white mix as a wash to do some basic coloring here. I'm going to go lighter to darker colors. Seems to work pretty well. Just poke around here, get some color in different areas. I already did this once up here, but then I had to cover up a whole bunch of it because I had completely missed. So we're gonna work through some of this, get a little bit of color here. Then I'm going to come back with the earth undercoat and see how that looks. And then I'll add burnt umber, raw umber, darker gray tones, charcoals and stuff. Just putting this on random, letting it drip down. As you can see, there's some gray color in there already, but I've added a lot of new plaster in here, so there's a lot of stuff that has no color on it at all. Let's put a little bit of gray over here. That's probably good for now. I don't want to get into this area. I still got some finish work to do here before I can do that side do this lower section here. So that's about good for the stone gray. And we'll come back with the earth undercoat. Try and get some deeper colors in here. It's pretty washed, so the color's still light, and then I'm going to start darkening as I go. Some of this I'm going to completely cover with the undercoat because I'm going to actually add grasses and stuff in here. I'll use this as a base. Some of it will make a little darker as well because this is really not dark enough for dirt, but it's a start. I love the way this just kind of runs down into the cracks and follows the contours of the rock to create the colors. And as I get to the darker colors, those contours in the rocks will be even more obvious. Go around the back here so that I can do the back side of the river on the other side of the tracks here. As I do this from over on this side, I can see different perspectives, and I kind of like to be able to do this, so that way I can change the colors around a little bit, add more color, and I can see where I'm missing stuff. I think that's about it for the earth undercoat wash. Now I'll start working on the next color, which will be raw umber. Or burn umber, I forget which one. Okay, so now I'm going to do some burn umber in here. Once again, just a wash. This might be too thin of a wash, but we'll see. I can always come back and darken it. Yeah, this is going to be too thin. I'm not getting the color that I want out of this. I'm going to add some more to it. I think that's a little better. I'll just keep layering colors on here until I get it to where I want it. I just realized I did something dumb, so I'll let you guys know what I did that was dumb. I forgot to shake up the paint before I poured it, and that's why it came out with so much red tone in it. So now I'm going back over it a little bit, at least some of these. I mean, it has a reddish tone to it, but it got worse. It was way too red, and so now I've got a little bit more reddish brown in it. I won't make that mistake again. Got to shake these things up before I start putting them on, otherwise it's just going to make a mess out of things. Those colors are a lot better. There's still got a nice red hue to it, but a lot more brown in it now, and that looks better. And it's still wash. I'm going to put on a less wash as I move on. Right now I'm just trying to get it to run into the crevices and stuff and give me some color tone. But yeah, don't forget to shake up your paint. Now coming back with raw umber wash. This is where a lot of the depth comes from. I'm still irritated that I did not shake up that burnt umber well enough, because it's leaving a reddish tint. This is going to be some work to cover this all up and fix those color issues, but we'll see how it comes out. It's getting a little better. Going to take a few more rounds of coloring, I think, in order to get this where I want it. I'm going to keep working through this, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So I had to use a lot of different colors in order to get back to some semblance of what I wanted this to look like, and get rid of that reddish color that I got from the burnt umber and the wash that I used on that. I used some yellow ochre, some yellow ochre white. I used a little bit heavier stone gray color. Used raw umber. Everything that I had here, I put in there, and I'm going to let this dry because I want to see how it dries, see how much color's in it, how white it is, because we have a lot of white tones over here, you know, or lighter gray tones over here. So I want to see how this dries before I touch it anymore, and then we'll get back into this. So after letting this dry overnight, the left side is definitely darker than the right side. Gonna have to figure out how I can deal with that and bring it up lighter. Let me brighten up the light. You can see, I mean, some of it is not too bad. It sort of looks the same but on camera, but it's not. It's much darker. So now I got to figure out what to do with this and to lighten it up, get it closer to that. I mean, the easiest thing to look at is this wall here and that one back there, and you can see how much darker the one on the left is. So I got some work to do there, figure that out, and I'll let you know how I do it. So to correct the issue with the too much darkness on the left side, I used a gray wash. I just used the stone gray with white, a lot more white than I normally would, and some water, and used that gray wash, and then I followed that up with another wash with yellow ochre and white, and I think it's a little bit better. Now I'm going to go back and highlight some darker areas as well as put some highlights in lighter grays. Okay, I'm finally comfortable with this scene. Everything looks to be pretty well balanced on both sides of the river here. I added some burnt umber, I added some yellow ochre with a white added into it to get it to be more of a tanner color. I added some gray wash, and then I came back after that all dried and added some gray highlights in various places. I think it looks pretty good, so I think for now I'm going to leave it alone. Going to start working on the river itself. I'm going to start a new video for the whole river scene as I work through that whole process. So I'm going to upload this and see you guys with the next video. So we'll end this video with me putting the bridges back in so you can see what this is going to look like. This will be the scene when the whole thing is done. We'll add the river, the waterfall, and then the rapids coming down. I'm excited to get on to the next video and do the upper part of the river and into the waterfall. I'll talk to you guys soon.